Welcome to the Clause YouTube channel.
Together, we strive for a safer, secure, and more stable world.
Jai Hind, sir, and Jai Hind viewers of Clause podcast. I'm privileged and honored to be on the Clause platform with Gen Mohinder Puri, the Architect-in-Chief of the recapturing of the Kargil Heights during the Kargil War. As a division commander, he was the man who was responsible to give us the victory in Kargil, in the Kargil War, which I think is India's India's military is one of the greatest achievements ever. Gen Puri, I will not even try to introduce him because they're well known, one of the most respected military leaders and well-regarded military leaders of the country. And not only during the Kargil War, but also giving service to our nation. He has demonstrated steadfast courage under fire, a strategic equipment which is unmatched, and an outstanding operational leadership. After 25 years, you have come out with the second book on Kargil, the Kargil Recapturing the Heights. The first one, Kargil Turning the Tide, which is called in 2009. I feel, having read that, and as a student of military history, that these two books constitute the most authentic accounts of the Kargil War for future generations. So, if I see Kargil, and pardon me for saying that, but I was also deployed there earlier. When Kargil happened, I thought that for the Indian military and especially for 8th Mountain Div, success was not a probability and failure not an option. So that is where I thought the Kargil War would, there would be some defining moments of the Kargil War. Because I'll say that again, success was not a probability and failure not an option. And that is where, sir, you took on the onerous task of recapturing the Kargil Heights, sir. I may take another second sense, talk of the law of synchronicity. Carl Jung once said, there's a law of synchronicity where when nations and organizations are in trouble, they find the right man at the right place for the right job. I think India was very fortunate, sir, to have you as the leader of 8th Mountain Div during the Kargil War at the right time, sir. Sir, may I start by asking you a very simple question, sir? Could you recapture for the audience the events leading to the recapture of the Kargil Heights?
A pleasure to be talking to you. Good morning, Vinod. It's always a pleasure to be talking to you, and thank you for the introduction. Now, just to give you a recap, 8th Mountain Division, since its raising, was always enrolled in counterinsurgency operations, first in the east, northeast, and then they came onto the western borders in J&K. Now, just before the induction of the division into Zojila, across Zojila, I was located at Sharifabad with the division looking after counterinsurgency operations in North Kashmir. And on hearing of this intrusion, which we were not very clear of in early May, by mid-May, there was a certain sort of a clarity that the Pakistanis had intruded into our area in large numbers. And I was requesting the Corps Commander that it's time for you to induct 8th Mountain Division. But of course, there are various, factors which need to be taken into consideration by the higher leadership and the higher headquarters. And this decision to induct the division across Zojila into the Drass and Mushkoh sector was taken in the end of May, and on 1st of June, I assumed the operational responsibility of the Drass and Mushkoh sectors. Now, when the division reached, when my headquarters, I reached Drass, there was, there was lack of information as to where was the enemy located at that point of time. Our intelligence was not up to the mark, and we could not accurately assess the deployment of the enemy. We knew that generally he was spread over a frontage of about 130 kilometers, and in the Drass Mushkoh sector, over another vast frontage. But it was difficult to pinpoint the deployment of the enemy. So the first job was obviously to send out patrols and find out where the enemy was. And there was a bit of hesitation by the in the patrols because you see it's a shift from counter-insurgency operations to conventional operations, and it takes time for the troops to get used to conventional warfare. And in CI operations, we were fighting with one hand tied behind our back. And here we were in a live situation of war. So, having finally got an idea of the assessment and deployment of the enemy, I took on the task of clearing the intrusion which was the closest to the national highway and which was dominating the national highway, gave the highest priority for that. And fortunately, after a lot of preparation, 10 to 12 days of preparation, we finally managed to capture Tololing, which was the most dominating feature on the national highway. And thereafter, it was from ridge to ridge that we took the operations forward.
Thank you, sir. That was a very focused sort of events, but I can well understand as a reader and as what would have gone through in the preparation, because in the army they say 1/3 of the time is spent for recce planning preparation, whereas you had no time. It was one hill after the other, one mountain after the other, sir. Other than Tololing, which was of course the first one, you covered it very well, sir, in your book. What are the defining moments of this nearly 50-day wars?
Tololing was the turning point of the war. And since I mentioned that Tololing was a very dominating feature, it was making movement of vehicles, civil and military, difficult for us. And as you know, this is the highway which joins Srinagar to Leh. All civil traffic, which at that time was required for the winter stocking of the Leh garrison and the forward post and the civil garrison, was very difficult because of the domination of Tololing over the national highway. So the first priority was given to capture Tololing, and we took about 10 to 12 days. And like I said, this was the turning point. It was a very fierce battle. We lost heavily in that in terms of men and officers and men. But finally, on the 13th of June, at first light, we managed to capture Tololing. And thereafter, that set the trend for the subsequent operations.
Sir, could you tell us something about that a sense of the terrain in the Kargil and the dispositions of the enemy dispositions when you reached there prior to the Tololing attacks?
Once you cross Sujala, you're really awestruck by the terrain, ruggedness of the mountains, vertical cliffs which you have to negotiate, inhospitable terrain. I think we were fighting at altitudes ranging between 15,000 to 20,000 feet, whereas we were operating in the valley at altitudes about 6 to 7,000 feet. So it required a complete transition from fighting in semi-mountainous terrain to extremely high altitude areas. And that was the biggest challenge for us initially as to how to get about, training your troops, how to improve, how to set your battle procedures and battle drills into action, and thereafter take on the enemy. So it was a very difficult task, and I think the terrain, like I mentioned, was the most inhospitable in which we have ever fought before. And movement over there in high altitudes, you go 2 steps up and you slip down 1 step because of the loose earth on the mountains. And it was a very uphill task. And I think full marks to the battalions who overcame these difficulties and, acclimatized properly. We took about 10, 12 days to acclimatize, prepare ourselves, and, refine our battle drills and procedures. And thereafter, we were ready for the operations.
In your view, 10 to 12 days is enough for the transition from counter-terrorism operations to conventional operations, that too in high altitude and super high altitude areas, sir?
Valid question. It's inadequate, definitely inadequate. But there was no other option. And the time was critical at that point of time. At that stage, time was of great criticality. We had to finish the operations by mid-August to prevent, because any delay after that, the winters would have set in and the enemy would have consolidated whatever gains there were. And in the next campaigning season, it would have been well nigh impossible for us to recapture those heights. So time was a very restraining factor, and uh, it had to be 10, 12 days, I thought, was adequate to, uh, you know, acclimatize the troops and then gear them for the offensive operations. Also, the Pakistan deployment was such that it was not a prepared defense, like a deliberate defense. These were hastily prepared defenses. There were no coordinated minefields. There were no obstacles to that extent. They had the advantage of sitting on heights. They had the advantage of having a certain amount of fortification of their defenses, and they had the advantage of uh, excellent views of weapons, which covered all the approaches. And the question which you asked is very relevant, that 10 to 12 days is inadequate, but nevertheless, when time is at a premium, you have to take these risks and take on the operation or the task which has been given to you.
I suppose the fortune does favor the brave, and even Pakistan were even taken by surprise. They won't expect the Indian armed forces to mobilize, and Indian armed mobilize, and yet wanted to go into attack straight away, coming from counter-terrorism operations. So I think that also factor would have played up a little. And you're right, sir. Had we gone to a second winter, things would have been very, very difficult, sir. So,
Yeah, definitely. Pakistan, one of the factors why they took on this operation was they did not expect a division to be inducted across Zojila at that time frame. So it was the speed and the ferocity with which we mobilized and, transformed in from transited from CI operation to conventional operation. That was a big surprise factor in our favor.
I do. I've got apprehensive about a few things, sir. But what were your apprehensions, sir, which you of course obviously overcame with great resilience during and prior to joining operations in Kargil, sir?
First was the induction of the division on that one single road axis. Induction of the division, we were inadequate as far as the artillery was concerned, so we had to induct additional artillery into the sector. And the higher headquarters were very nice. They sent us the Bofors guns, about 2 regiments worth. Then I have the multi-barrel rockets battery with me, the heavy mortars. These gradually got inducted by the time the first operation was had taken place. But this was a very major challenge of how to build up the division for that attack. You had to have adequate ammunition. You had to have logistics. Movement was slow because tunneling was one of the restraining factors as far as logistics were concerned. We could move beyond the transit camp in Drass because of the effectiveness of the enemy fire. So, moving the entire division, mobilizing them, concentrating them, building up the logistics, these were the challenges which were there before we could really get on to the task. And this was one of my biggest apprehension, along with changing the mindset of the soldiers and the officers. for years we were used to CI operations, and suddenly to be inducted for conventional operations required a degree of changing of the mindset from where you're fighting with one hand tied to your back, and here you have an enemy in a war-like situation. So the people have to be motivated to gear up for these type of operations.
Thank you, sir. Sir, now all our teaching in our schools of instruction otherwise, and also military history, sir. The combat ratio of troops for capturing heights of over 9,000 feet and 12,000 feet is generally put as 1:9, 1:12, sir. And here we had only 8 mountain division with the integral resources trying to capture heights spread over an area of about nearly 100 kilometers. What do you have to say to that? How did you overcome that?
Normally, the ratio, like you said, is 3:1. But here, knowing the type of deployment where the enemy was, the terrain was taken into consideration, the altitude was taken into consideration, all these factors, when we considered, I thought a ratio of 9:1 would be more suitable and appropriate for the initial sort of operation. But as time went by and we realized what is the type of deployment there, a lesser ratio, we did manage to capture those objectives with a smaller ratio of troops. But the initial success which we achieved was definitely to hit a peanut with a hammer and break it. And that is what we did. We used the ratio of 9:1. Like for Tololing, we used the whole battalion where perhaps initially only a platoon of the enemy was there, which of course later on, the company was deployed from Tololing on 2.5140. But for the initial attack, we definitely used a battalion for the capture of this feature.
Sir, now that it's quarter of a century since the Kargil War and more, what could have been done differently, sir?
As to what could have been done differently, I really failed to find an appropriate answer for this. Firstly, because the terms of reference were such that we could not cross the line of control. So in case we wanted to tackle the first ridge line, we would have had to go, north of the enemy and perhaps go across the line of control and then roll southwards. But since that was not possible, and since the way the enemy was deployed allowed us very little scope for carrying out any flanking movements, etc. So the best option for us was to go along the spurs, and in extreme circumstances to go for a frontal attack. So this was how the battles were planned all over, and nothing much could have been done. And I think the way we went about it, perhaps at that point of time, was the best. Today, with the advent of drones and multiple sort of weaponry which is available, things could have been different. But at that point of time, 25 years back, I even when I look back and I think perhaps that was the only way we could have tackled the enemy. And
Thank you, sir.
particularly when time was at a premium, we didn't have the luxury of time with us, and it had to be completed by. This was the terms of reference which I put on myself, that we had to complete the operation by mid-August to give us time to thereafter carry out the winter stocking and then deploy the division for the winters. So, time was at a premium and there was no other option other than the way we went.
Thank you, sir. It's not so easy, but I recollect, sir, the defense attaches going to that area. They were taken to that area, sir. And one of the questions asked from the defense attache was, rather, the defense attache, how could you even think of attacking such features? So the question asked to him was, what would you have done? And his answer very simple. He said, we would have nuked them. So that was the impossibility of the task which you and the troops performed. Would have nuked them was answer, and you were fighting, recapturing the heights with again your hands tied behind the back. Time was a constraint. Maneuver was a constraint. You could not cross the line of control. There was, I must also say, that the troops were, they had to be prepared post haste for attacks. Sir. So there's I think one of the major factors would be leadership, sir. And the country was fortunate that you were the leader at that point of time, sir. What would like to tell the leadership of today, both military and civil, on how to overcome such restrictions and adversities and still succeed, sir?
I think, thanks for the compliment, Vinod, you're always very kind. Leadership at the junior level was outstanding. I think that is in the DNA of the Indian Army. Young officers and soldiers are so beautifully led by these young officers. They just say, follow me, and irrespective of the dangers ahead, they have shown courage beyond the call of duty. And we had very heavy casualties, and all because of the courage displayed by these young officers. So I think a major part of the victory in Kargil has to be attributed to these young officers and men. And I think they showed outstanding courage, discipline, and brought their training to good use in overcoming the difficulties of the terrain and the enemy opposition. So I think junior leadership was of a very high standard. Now coming on to the middle rung leadership, that is the commanding officers, I think they displayed outstanding qualities of, how to run their battalions, how to command their battalions. They suffered the privations with the soldiers. They were there, present for all operations, accompanying the troops. And where there was a certain amount of laxity amongst the commanding officers, they were replaced or dealt with pretty severely. So I think the commanding officers did an outstanding job along with the brigade commanders. Now the brigade commanders is not an easy thing to be managing wide frontages with limited resources, with inhospitable inhospitable terrain. But I think the way they brought their brigade and their battalions on a cohesive sort of a network was highly commendable. And I think these were the attributes of leadership which they displayed: courage. Uh, rest is how they suffered with the privations with the men, the way they raised the morale, the way they trained them, the way they refined the battle drills and battle procedures. I think this all went into the success of the operations. And you can't just say the qualities of leadership like given in our manuals and textbooks. This was a real life situation where they displayed courage, bravery, determination, even to the point of sacrificing their lives where it was called for. So I think it was an outstanding effort by these officers and young men.
Sir, without doubts, we salute the leaders and the led both rank and file. But I do feel, sir, along with this liberty, somehow the calm, composed, confident leadership from the top also flows down, sir. They look at the leader, and I was there for a little time, and I saw you move around just with you and your cousin Jace, with nothing else, visiting the troops, talking to them. I think that the leadership went down from there. The confidence came from there, sir, because the confident leader. So I must also say that the top leadership has a major role to play. And second thing, sir, let me also take a minute more. That in '99 was a time when we had started questioning our junior leaders for not being good enough, sir. I think one of the changes which Kargil brought about was that we reimposed our trust in junior leadership. So I think the junior leaders, there's no doubt about it. And there are a lot of lessons to be learned on leadership from that, sir. Sir, I think we should finish around half an hour because people don't have the time to see more than half an hour, 35 minutes, sir. Let me ask you a simple thing. What is the role of media, sir, during the Kargil War, sir? A little bit, sir.
I think the media did a commendable piece of work. Initially, we were not very clear as to, we didn't have a very clearly defined media policy. But as time progressed, the media was allowed into the battle areas. and they did a commendable piece of work in bringing the war into the drawing rooms and bedrooms of the country. I think if you recall at that point of time, any cremation which was taken place, any, the body moving to the villages, lakhs of people attending the cremation, that was the work of the media, how they sort of connected the war and how they brought it to the common man as to what are the sacrifices which were being made by the army in Kargil. I think media played a fantastic role in that, and they deserve full credit for the first time when the TVs were when the media brought the war into the bedrooms and the drawing rooms of the country. And this, seeing when we used to see this even during the operation, it felt a connectivity with the citizen because you knew the country was behind you. You knew that what they were appreciating what you were doing, and I think it went a long way in uh, having that sort of a good feeling that the country is supporting your war effort and understanding the sacrifices which are being made by the men and officers. So that way, I think the media played a remarkable, did a remarkable piece of work.
Thank you, sir. Because media, I think, did a remarkable. Not only the people of India were, relating to the war in Kargil. I think I must say that because of the media, sir. So, what is the role of the people of Kargil, sir? Because I think they were very important in giving the logistic support and giving the ponies and carrying the loads and all, sir. A word about that, sir.
A lot needs to be said about that. And the local population. I have been to Drass many times after, the last 25 years, and I've met those people who helped us in the war effort, particularly the pony drivers and the people who were the small time contractors who had ponies and the porters who helped us. All these people did a commendable piece of work in supporting us as far as logistics are concerned. We didn't have the luxury of having, uh, troops, surplus troops who could beef up the logistic effort of carrying ammunition right up to the top, carrying food supplies to the top. So it was these porters, ponies, and later on the pioneers who came in from the army, who contributed to the logistic effort, and the support which they gave us was tremendous.
Yes, I think we have to salute the people of Kargil for supporting this thing. Sir, one last one, sir. We just been through Ops Sindhu, which is a very sharp, swift, and a very relevant operation which we done. However, Pakistan blames India for not accepting the loss of some aircraft, which they feel that we had lost, and we had lost some because of this thing. But during the Kargil War, sir, the casualty figures of Pakistan by then Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif comes to about 4,000, sir, and 289 dead bodies were recovered, sir. But they never owned up that they were Pakistani soldiers, and you still gave them, a dignified burial when you captured them, sir. So, why do you think that, on the one hand, they blame us for not even, accepting some losses, and on the other hand, they said Kargil was not our doing. So, don't you find this something, really? I can't understand this from the Pakistani side, sir.
Of the Pakistanis. I mean, my division, I think we buried about 145 soldiers, regular soldiers from the NLI Frontier Force. We returned bodies to the commanding officer of a battalion in a proper ceremonial function, which has been videotaped and I think it's available on the social media. And the dead bodies of the Pakistani soldiers which we buried, we gave them full military honors. We took the Maulvis by helicopter to places where the bodies could not be brought back. So in situ, we transported the Maulvis and recorded, of course, whatever actions were being taken by us. But they were given a complete military ceremonial burial. And today, if Pakistan is saying that they were not responsible for Kargil, I think they're talking through their hat absolutely. And what they're talking about in Operation Sindoor, that they have not had any losses, and the losses have been tremendous from the Indian side. So you have to take it with a pinch of salt. It's not a pinch of salt; it may be much more than a tablespoon of salt also, because these are people who are always in denial. And till date, I think most of them are in denial even as to what happened in Kargil.
So I think you have actually summed it up. Hats off to you, sir, but sparing the resource at that point of time to send the people for giving the proper military dignified burial to the Pakistani soldiers, sir. Something which they have never recognized till now. And sir, one last word, sir. Any message from your side to the people who are deployed, to the troops who are deployed in Kargil and to the people of Kargil, sir?
Excellent. So they are totally tuned onto the. I've been to Kargil many times, to 8 Mountain Division a couple of times, and seen how they are operating and how they are functioning. I think there's we can rest assured, the country can rest assured that the Indian Army is there to ensure the security and sanctity and dignity and honor of the country at all times. So I think there could be a better armed forces of which the country should be proud of for defending them and maintaining the territorial integrity of the country.
Sir, we should, I think we all should thank you for recapturing the Kargil Heights as the leader on the spot, as the architect in chief of the Kargil War, on the ground, at the tactical level, the operational level, and understanding the strategic constraints of the nation and the armed forces during that point of time, sir. I think this is one war which has no parallel in military history. Yes, there have been capture of Bana posts, there have been other wars, but this was one concentrated war fought at the heights of 15,000, 16,000, 17,000 feet, and with little preparation. And you did defeat, I don't think the Pakistanis ever thought that we would be able to recapture this. I suppose they did not see the might of the Indian Army and Indian Armed Forces to do this. And thank you very much, sir. One last moment, sir. Let me say that recapturing the Kargil War, Recapturing the Heights, I think it's a book which is one of the most authentic reads, sir. Easy to read, easy to understand, gives the right picture, sir, and it should form part of our military history, not only for for Indian Armed Forces but everywhere. I think there were a number of books written on Kargil, but these two books which you have authored, sir, are one of the most authentic, and anyone can read this. And if you really want to see what went into it, into Recapturing the Heights, I think this is the book to read, sir. Sir, some last words from you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vinod. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Sir, honored. Honored indeed. Thank you, sir, and good day, sir. Good day to all the viewers.